let's talk about what Vienna Ensemble Pro is. So, VSL, Vienna Sound Library, is a company that's been around for decades, I believe. I think it's been around since the late 90s or early 90s or something like that. Okay, so let's go to vsl.co.at. I don't know where AT is. Does anyone know where AT is? So these are the guys. So let's talk about what I'm dealing with. This is a company that makes primarily orchestral libraries, and they do it at a very high end of the market, which means one of the things that they concern themselves with is efficiency. So people can have massive projects with lots of instruments running, and in order to be able to do that without having to, bounce everything down to audio or freeze your tracks, they've invented this product called VEP, Vienna Ensemble. I'm going to give my own explanation rather than the marketing stuff. There is a free version just called Vienna Ensemble. So the pro version you've got to pay for, and you can see that this is the actual price here. So it's not cheap, and I picked it up for reasons which I'll explain shortly, apart from the fact that I am planning on getting into orchestral composing. What it does is it provides a container to put your virtual instruments, and also effects actually, so that you can abstract it away from your DAW. So there might be a number of reasons why you want to do that, but the killer feature of this is that they allow you to run this container on a different machine across the network. So you can essentially create like a server farm for your project, for your single project. So your DAW then becomes the coordinator, and a container is implemented as a server, which has all your plugins. You can see there's a screenshot here, but I'll just bring it up for you so you can see what the container looks like. Okay, so this is launching a server. This is not connected to my DAW yet. I haven't connected it to Bitwig. So this is a server with an empty container. So I click the plus sign and I create what's called an instance. So this instance can contain multiple channels, each of which can host an instrument the same way that a DAW will. But this container has no concept of time. So there's no timeline, there's no arranger. That's done from your DAW. So the way that works is that your DAW will connect to this server. You see at the top here, it says Vienna Ensemble Pro server. And so now you have to connect to that server using a VST plugin from inside your DAW. So let's do that. So if I search here for Vienna, let's just go back to the thing. So for whatever reason, I don't seem to be able to use that, but I can use this. So Vienna Ensemble Pro, I'm using the surround version. I have to for some reason. That's just I don't even know what that is. It's a problem. So we're not connected yet, but because on this same computer I have VEP running in the background, now I can connect to it. So if I click connect, it's going to show me all of the computers on the network that are running VEP or a VEP server. And then in that VEP server, you can have multiple instances. Now the instance is represented by this blue box that's called untitled at the moment. So let's just call this, Teza instance. Teza instance 1. All right. So now if I go back to Bitwig, you can see that's updated in real time. But I can create a new instance on the fly from within Bitwig, and so I can actually do things on the VEP server through the plugin on Bitwig. Let's just connect to this one. So you see how that's pretty quick. You'll notice there's a thing over here called buffers. So that's kind of adds some extra headspace for processing. So obviously that means that the round trip latency, which is indicated in the lower right hand corner, is going to increase. Like if I set this to none, it's saying that the round trip is basically instant, but obviously it depends on your processing power and how many plugins you've got loaded into the container and what they're doing. But generally we set it to 2 buffers. I think it's a multiple of the latency that you currently have set for your audio interface. So I think you have your normal latency. So if I have none, these actually, I still have my normal sound card latency. It hasn't eliminated that. This is just the latency between VEP and Bitwig. But what it does is it adds a multiple of your existing latency that is based on what you set here. So obviously my latency must be set to 1024. And so that's adding that man round trip. And by default, it's 2 buffers. So that just gives you a little bit more latency, but it also allows you to put more things in the container without having glitches and pops and all that sort of stuff. So there's always a compromise. There is going to be a bit of a compromise by abstracting the processing tasks out of the DAW into this server container. But when you can distribute your server container, onto spare computers. And by the way, I could have a server container running on a Mac and still access it from Windows, or vice versa. But unfortunately, there's no support for Linux at this moment, which is very disappointing to me because I must spend most of my time using Linux on the laptop. So it would be great. But I still have Windows, it's dual boot. So, I can access my PC in the studio, which has all my plugins installed. And I don't have to have those same plugins installed on my laptop. I can walk around the house with the laptop accessing VE Pro from the studio. So that's one of the reasons why I grabbed this, because it means that I still have to be on the same local network. It's not the sort of thing that you would do over the internet, although you could do it using your own VPN. But I haven't run that test, and I don't think it's going to be very functional, although I haven't run the test, so maybe that's something that I'll do later. Okay, one of the reasons why I'm doing this video is because nobody really has gone to any great effort to do examples of DAWs that are not used by the community, the type of community that uses the VSL products. So that type of community generally uses Digital Performer, Pro Tools, Cubase, and Logic. So if you're using another DAW, you're SOL. Shit out of luck. So that's my purpose here today. Hopefully by the time I edit this video, it's not going to be too boring. So now we've already connected to this. Now, what does that mean? It means nothing until we put something inside the container. So now if I go back to the container, I have already gone through and scanned all of the plugins on my system. And you can see them here under VST. Now VSL comes with its own player, so it doesn't need to go through the VST interface, so it's got its own integrated stuff. So this is effects. That's another thing too, actually. It comes with its own effects, but it has its own instruments. It's got multiple instruments, but I've got the free Vienna Synchron player, because the only product that I own is actually VEP, but I have all of their free stuff, which is very, very, very much worth getting. So, and by the way, you do need the iLok. I'll just walk you through that just quickly. Okay, so I'm going to log into VEP. Okay, so what I've done is I have an iLok account. Now, you can get an iLok account even if you don't have the physical iLok USB device. So when I created a VSL account, which is also free, I attached my iLok account. So it's free to go and create an iLok account. You don't need the hardware USB key. And then I have to log into my VSL profile and then add my iLok user ID so that when I buy something at VSL, it automatically gets added to my iLok profile. There are certain products that they sell which don't require you to have the USB hardware. In fact, let me just launch iLok. So iLok has this ability to run in the cloud as well. Look at my cloud activations here. VEP, which I purchased, that's attached to the cloud. It's actually not using the hardware device. Yeah, so now I've made a bunch of purchases, which is this one here. This is the only purchase that I've made. Everything else here is free. That's pretty significant. 5 libraries: Celestial Strings, Soft Imperial Piano, Epic Orchestra 2.0, Big Bang Orchestra, to Fujara Flute Library. Those are all free. So you can get a free account here, and then you go and purchase them for $0 to add them to your account. So you go to those products, and then you go to Starter, Hello Free Instruments, all the free stuff. You'd be mad if you didn't get it. So let's just say you don't have Vienna Ensemble Pro. You do actually get Vienna Ensemble. You can see this one over here. So that comes for free, and it's all managed via this Vienna Assistant, VSL, the VSL Assistant. We can see all of the products that they have here, which is quite a lot. Like I said, they've been around for a while. These products are pretty significant too. I'm scrolling past them really quick, but you've got all these different players. The one that you get for free is the Synchron player, and you can see it's got the tick here, so I don't need to buy it. I got it for free. These ones with a little shopping bag here means that you haven't bought those yet. But the easiest way to see what you own is just click installed on the side. Everything here is free except for the Pro version of Vienna Ensemble, which is listed here, Vienna Ensemble Pro. It says plus the MIR, IR stands for impulse response, something impulse response, but you need to buy actual impulse response things for that to be activated. So I'll just be referring to Vienna Ensemble Pro as VEP from now on, or VEP7. Look at this, Epic Orchestra, 75 gigabytes for free. It's pretty epic. And all of these free instruments will play back using this player. Now, in your DAW, you don't need to use VEP to access all the Vienna stuff. I can just access the Vienna Synchron player, like so. And it works like Contact. So, it's got its own browser here for all of the libraries, the VSL libraries that you have installed. And then you can open the Epic Orchestra. Let's just go to Synchron Strings. And yeah, just double click on that. And you can see it's much more efficient than Contact. It's a really standardized interface. It's very functional. I think I've got my keyboard hooked up. Let me just try. There you go. I'll have to pick something with a really slow attack, wouldn't I? Anyway, so yeah, this is what you get for free. Now, getting back to Vienna Ensemble, let me just undo that. So let's talk about this server container and how we can load instruments and effects into it. Okay, so there's nothing here at the moment. It comes with its own master bus. Virtual instruments that have multiple outputs, such as Contact, such as any of the drumming apps like Stephen Slate Drums or Superior Drummer or whatever, they allow you to have multiple outputs. So you can just click here and say assign missing chains, and Vienna Ensemble is the same. It has multiple audio outputs. So at the moment, there are 16 outputs that show up as 8 stereo pairs, and that is because of how VEP has been set up. So if I go into the server, if I look at preferences, I can see here under instances, I've got 16 audio outputs, so that's 16 mono outputs. And I can actually make this a lot higher if I wanted to. Let's just see how high that goes. Holy smokes. So there's a lot. Let's just say there's hundreds. Okay, let me set that back to 32. So we can have 16 stereo pairs. And we can just add them as we need to. Now let's just see, if I do this, I'm making a major change now. Let me just up this to 16 as well while we're here. And audio input, that means if I want to send audio to VEP for processing through audio FX plugins in an outboard kind of way, I can do that too. Let's just leave it at 8. So 32 audio outputs from VEP and 8 audio inputs into VEP. So that's telling me that I've got to restart the plugin from within the DAW because currently it's connected. I can actually disconnect the plugin, the DAW from here. So we're dealing with one instance at the moment. I don't know if you noticed, but when I was looking at the preferences, it was saying this was on the instances tab. So these numbers apply per instance. And so that's an important concept because I can have multiple instances in the server. So think of the server as a container. That container can contain instances, and each instance can contain tracks and plugins. All right. So it's just plumbing, really. Plumbing and encapsulation. So the server being the outer capsule, the instance being the next capsule inside that. And then inside the instance, you've got this concept of channels, starting with the master bus channel. You can see up here, it says channels. And so the top channel is the master bus. And you can see here, I can specify which of these ports I can send out to. So at the moment, it's only got 16 ports listed here, even though I have just updated that to 32. So it looks to me like I have to restart this instance. I can turn it off and turn it back on again. And it hasn't updated. Wow, okay. Instance, like if I go instance, say new project, do you want to save changes? Oh, no, I don't want a new project, I just want a new instance. I just click the plus sign. There we go. So now I'm in this instance. So now I've got all 32. I'm going to scuttle this instance, and this cannot be undone. No undo function for deleting your instance. Careful with that one. Okay, so as you can imagine, you can add multiple channels here, and it's going to show up here in the mixer. So down the bottom here, there's different types of operations on the channel. You can add a native VSL player, and that comes in as another channel with the instrument loaded onto the channel. And you can see it automatically takes me to that instrument, but I can go back to the mixer and I can see that it's added a channel plus a virtual instrument into it. Obviously, this is a native instrument made by VSL themselves, so they have their own category here. If you want to do a generic one, by the way, you can do all this in the free version of Vienna Ensemble, but you need the pro version if you want to be able to load third-party VSTs like we're going to do. So if I click on insert plugin here, you can see I've got access to all the integrated VSL ones, plus I've got all of the VST ones that I have installed as well. So for example, let's do Contact. So I've got Contact here under my favorites, so it's easy to access. So I click on Contact, and so slow and big and fat and bloatware. Here it comes. Tick-tock. There we go. So Contact is loaded. All right, so now if we have a look at the outputs for here, I believe everything would be just going to stereo 1 output. Let's click on this over here, and yeah, output is just to stereo 1, and we don't have anything fancy set up. So now this stereo output for Contact is going to go directly to the master bus because that's what I've got set here. If I wanted to, I could change it so that it goes to output 3 and 4, okay? This is where it gets a little bit confusing because all of the rules that apply for a device to have multiple output ports based on encapsulation. Contact's output ports are encapsulated into this channel that's inside of another VST device. So from the perspective of the DAW, this here is just one VST device. Bitwig doesn't know anything about the server that's behind this. It just sees this as one device. And so it can query this device about how many output channels it has, and it goes, oh, okay. VEP has 16 outputs. They're stereo pairs. So here's 8 stereo outputs from this device. And that's all Bitwig cares about. Bitwig doesn't know anything about the internals that are going on inside of here. Bitwig doesn't know about what is encapsulated in here. So I'm using the word encapsulation because it comes from the software development sort of nomenclature. It's a usable analogy here. So if we go back to the server, whatever's coming out here has to end up, has to be dealt with by this channel that's inside of Vienna. Okay. So now if I say go out to 3 and 4, even though this is going out to 1 and 2 here, it's just going out to stereo 1. Okay. So let's just, I don't know, let's play some drums. Okay. So that's heading out there and it's coming out to 3 and 4. So if I just move this aside and I hit this, you can see it's coming out 3 and 4. Because 3 and 4 is the property of the VSL plugin. Now that might seem really obvious, and I know I'm belaboring the point a little bit, but it's really easy to get into a bit of a tangle if you're not careful. So that's why I've gone to so much trouble to explain it. But the point is, these can really be unlimited. So you can have a ton of instruments loaded in here. There are some challenges associated with that. You just have to be organized. Just a quick look back at the mixer again. So we can see here, this is just like any mixer you would see in a DAW. The instrument at the very start of the signal chain. And then that is then obviously followed by the effects, which is followed by the fader, and the signal is processed from top to bottom in that order. Okay, and just like a DAW, you can put things into groups and manipulate them all at once. So this is really designed for having huge projects with huge instrument library collections, so that you can do big productions without having to freeze everything. And you can stay flexible and you can stay composing, you can stay in the creative mode without having to freeze and unfreeze things because performance issues. Provided you've got enough computers to share the load around. Let's just load in an effect here just so that we can see. So I've just loaded in Waves, True Verb. Now when we go back to the plugin, we've got our reverb. So that's the signal chain. Nothing unusual. Obviously, you're going to need to create a bus if you want to do send effects. You can actually send directly to another output, apparently, which could be very useful if you're just sending everything to master, but you just want to send an extra copy out. I don't know if you would ever want to do that, but if you want to create an extra channel, you just hit this plus button here. And so now this channel, I can make it a return channel for effects. So let's just say I send that to the last output, and now it's just an organizational thing. I'm going to say reverb return. Okay, so now I'm just making up a naming convention on the fly. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that reverb over to here. Hold down some kind of shift to move it. Okay, so now that's going to be my reverb. I can set it to 100%. Just basically just means I take down the direct output. And I can go into the contact thing and I can send a little bit of that out to the reverb, and I can crank up how much gets sent. So it's a little bit like a Reaper in that you kind of have to build your own infrastructure. You kind of have to know what you're doing. Like, it doesn't have a little button over here saying add a effects return. You have to make your own. And I actually think that when your needs are such that you're creating such big projects that you have a need for a tool like this, at that stage you probably already know what effects return is and how to set that up and how to do all that logically. And then of course there's just the details of how it's implemented, and that's what I'm doing this video. So you can see the details of how it's implemented, but also how it works in the context of Bitwig. So now I've got reverb return for both of these players. If I was to just make some noise again, we should actually be getting some reverb output coming out of 15 and 16. Here's an interesting thing though, okay? This lock here means that the server is going to lock the configuration of everything within this instance at least. There's a lock here that's on a per instance basis. So the server is going to lock this instance so that it's not affected by me disconnecting from it using this, for want of a better term, a client. So this VEP virtual instrument is actually a client for the VEP server. If I disconnect from the VEP server, this lock means that it doesn't switch off the instance. So let's connect again to this instance. Let's just test that theory out. And if I go back here and I unlock it, if I unlock this instance, you can see it's unlocked there now as well. And then I disconnect from it. Let's see what happens. Bam. I've absolutely lost my I lost my entire configuration. And because I didn't save it, I don't think I saved it. Let's have a look here. No, didn't save it. Because I didn't save it, now it's gone. Now, maybe I can undo that. No, that's not, I'm not getting it back. So I like to keep things locked, yeah? So now if I click connect, yeah, that instance that we had before, the Tezza instance 1, that is gone. I click connect and it's like, nah, Tezza instance is gone. Even if I undo here, I can press the undo button as much as I want. I don't know what happened then. I just clicked Tezza instance and then it must have reconstructed it. Holy crap. Where is the server? Here's the server. Okay. So here's a good point, okay? The configuration for all of this was stored with the plugin in the Bitwig project. So all of that Tezza instance is stored the same way that, for example, Bitwig will store all of my settings for these plugins that I've got over here. In this case, I've got pigments. So I can make all these changes to pigments which aren't saved in the presets, and Bitwig will keep track of that and save it with a project file. Vienna Ensemble allows all of the configuration for the server to be contained within the project. But you can see that there's a bit of a delay. So let's disconnect from that again. And then let me just tile these side by side so we can see what the heck is going on here. Okay. So now if if I unlock this instance has no active connections and will be deleted immediately. All unsaved data will be lost. Do you want to continue? And say, oh no, I don't want to continue that. See, that's kind of separated now because it's not connected. But if I connect to it now, there's this thing flashing here saying, hey, the DAW virtual instrument client is trying to send you configurational data. Do you want to overwrite what you've got on the server with the configuration that's been stored with the client, with the DAW project? And I can say, yeah, okay, load the incoming project data. Okay, so now it's going to reload all of the plugins inside of that instance according to the configuration that was saved here. Now if I unlock this, it's not going to warn me because it has a live link to the configuration data as stored in the Bitwig project. Even though I haven't saved the Bitwig project, the Bitwig project has the configuration data for this plugin, which encapsulates all of that or all of that instance, I should say. Let's just save this as an example, right? So we do actually have a save. Okay, now we know that's saved, yeah? So now I can actually close this project. I'm not really interested in saving it because we weren't really doing anything with it. And I can create an entirely new project. Let's go, new project. Vienna. Let's get the surround one. Okay, now this has got no knowledge about what's in here, but I can connect to it nonetheless. Bam. All right, and I can even go here and I can say, hey, give me all the channels. So Bitwig's going to query VST3 instrument device, which is this client. We'll come back and say, hey, I've got X amount of outputs. And Bitwig will fill in the rest. We've gone down to 32 now because this fresh copy of the client, see, I needed to restart the client in order to update the number of ports. So if I go into the number of ports here and I say, hey, you know what? Let's make 64. Let's make 64 tracks or 64 ports, whatever you want to call them. 64 channels. 64 output channels, auxiliary channels, if you like, per instance. Now it's actually telling me I have to restart any running Vienna Ensemble Pro plugins on the system to apply the changes. Okay, so I'm going to go like that. This is not going to give me 64. It's just giving me 32. But, so this is saved, so I can close this now and I can reload it. Yep. So now I can just reload that one. There's the toots. Now, let's see how many ports we got. Yeah, we got all 64 because it's been reloaded with the new settings. Okay. This still can't see all 64. So what I might do is I might go and select all of these. Can I shift select? Yeah. Works better when you don't hold caps lock. I delete all of those. All those auxiliary ports are gone now. And then all I need to do here is deactivate this, which is the same as pressing Alt A, I believe, and then reactivate it. And now when I add, oh, first of all, I have to connect it. So let's connect to that. So now when I add missing ports, it should be all the way down to 64. Boom. Okay. Easy peasy. All right, so that's clumsily explained. Now this is saying, hey, there's some configuration data coming in from the client, and I'm just like, I don't care. Let's just manage all this separately. That's the way I like to do it. That's the conclusion that I've come to, is not to let the DAW manage it. Kind of keep a healthy sort of wall of separation. There's actually an additional decoupling thing that you can do here. I can't remember what that's all about. I'd have to check the manual. But for the time being, knowing that using this lock thing here, it basically puts up an extra firewall between the project data coming from the plugin client and the VEP server. And so that you can manage it separately. And then you get given the choice. What happens with project data? Should Bitwig try to send configurational information, you know, when it loads up and stuff like that. So that's that. So let me go back to the other example that I made before. And before I load that, I'm actually going to start it up here. So I'm going to open the Rigid Pro TK11. Are you sure you want to disconnect and delete? Yep. I don't really care about all the other ones. Do you want to save changes? No. Okay, so now this is disconnected because the instance went away. And I don't really care about this project, so I'm going to close that. And then I'm going to load this TK11 VEP version of my project. Okay, so these two things are loading at the same time. Now, this has got some plugins to load, but they're not very many. And you can see this project's basically loaded now. And I can load up the VEP instance. It's already connected. There's a bunch of instrument here. It's not a massive project, but it's big enough to kind of illustrate the point. Got the master bus, which is going to output 1 and 2. Put everything in buses. So you got this concept of folders down here, right? So you can add another folder. Undo insert folder, Control Z. So I'm in a separate app now. It's different from being in a plugin. So when you're working inside of a plugin with your DAW, all your keyboard shortcuts get intercepted by the DAW, whereas I'm literally switching between two separate programs running on my computer now. So when I'm running on the server, this has got full control of my keyboard shortcuts. Well, first of all, let's just play this back and see if it's actually, everything's working. So I'm just going to go back to the beginning, hit play, full screen. Okay, so the first thing to notice, even though that sounds bloody awful, the first thing to notice is that unlike with a normal setup, you don't have an instrument on the track where you've got your MIDI notes. I've actually only got two instruments inserted into this whole project. One of them is the VEP client that we've been talking about so far. The other one is another VEP client, but this one's different in that it sends note events, it sends MIDI events into that server instance. So this one connects to that one instance. Now, normally you can't have more than one client connected to an instance for obvious reasons. So I can't have multiple tracks here in Bitwig connecting to the same instance. The only way I can send notes, extra notes to this instance is to use the special event input. So you can see here in the Vienna stuff, we've got the main VEP client, which is this guy here. And then we've got this event input, which is this guy here. So this kind of merges MIDI events into that server instance, okay? And I can also do that with audio, although I haven't found the need to send audio into the server container where it can be processed and then returned back. It just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to do that. Now, there are other circumstances where it probably will, but just not in. I just haven't done that in this project. I might do it, but at the moment I haven't. So let's have a look at how we actually get music out of this stuff. So let's start here with the first MIDI event. So this MIDI has to be sent into the instrument which is located in the server, which I think is the Arca. So I've got a folder here for pads, and under pads I've got a channel which I've named Arcus, and that's because it's pointed to the contact instrument containing the Arcus library, which happens to be using the Drunken Band snapshot. So I'll call this Arcus Drunken Band. I've sent that to a bus which I've made up called the pads bus, and then the pads bus goes and sends that to output 3 and 4. So now we've got the MIDI information being sent to this VEP client. The VEP client is this TK11.1. It's sent there, and the MIDI itself is on channel 1. That's important for the other MIDI clips. So now we need to make sure that everything's going to the right address. So it's going to the VEP client on MIDI channel 1, and then the VEP client sends that MIDI channel 1 information to the TK11 instance. And then if we go to the TK11 instance here in the server, we can see that MIDI channel 1 is being handled by Contact. If I click on it, we can see that this is the Arcus instance of Contact. Now, to complicate matters, there's this issue of multiple ports. So we're talking about MIDI ports now. We're not talking about audio ports. So this 16 here, that's not 16 channels. The MIDI specification provides for 16 channels for MIDI notes in one MIDI instrument. But when I say one MIDI instrument, what I really mean is one port. So if I've got 16 ports, each of which have 16 channels, that means that I've got 16 times 16 channels. So 16 ports, 16 channels. Now let's go over here and look at these two numbers here. Looking at Arcus now. So it's one of 16 channels. If I hover over that, if we look down the very bottom of the server, it says MIDI channel 1, okay? But if I go over here, it says MIDI port 1. So you can multiply the ports by the channel. So all of these, this number here, 16, VE Pro plugin MIDI in 1, that's based on 16 MIDI ports equals 16 MIDI ports here, each of which have 16 channels. Okay, so you can see we've gone down MIDI port 1, channel 1, MIDI port 1, channel 2, MIDI port 1, channel 3, all the way down the line until I get to drums. And I've said, well, how do we handle MIDI port 2? So I've got MIDI port 2 now. I've decided I'm just going to put all my drums on port 2. And I could have picked any MIDI channel. I didn't have to start with 10. I could have started with 1 if I wanted to. But this is 10 for one of my drum plugins, and this is 11 for the other of my drum plugins. So how do I get to these? How do I actually send MIDI information to these guys? Well, unfortunately for us Bitwig users, Bitwig has no concept of sending something to a particular port. What really should happen is if I click on this virtual instrument here, for the properties of that virtual instrument, it should have the ability to specify a port number. Right now, the way Bitwig does things is, as a property of the track, it will allow you to specify a MIDI channel, but it says nothing about the port number. And I don't even think it should be bound to the track. It really should just be bound to the plugin. It should be, you know, in the purest sense. It intuitively makes more sense to bind it to the track, but technically I think it should be bound to the plugin, because with Bitwig, it's really flexible. You can actually have more than one virtual instrument on one track, because that's what's cool about Bitwig, is that the plumbing is 100% abstracted and universal. So you can do things like that. But anyway, that's kind of academic. But if you were gonna allow someone to specify the channel here, you should also allow someone to specify the port. Unfortunately for us, this is a missing feature from Bitwig. It's not missing from programs like Studio One or Cubase or Logic or even Digital Performer, but it's missing from Bitwig. But there is a workaround for that, because only VST3 has this concept of ports. They had to create a workaround for DAWs that could only use VST2 back in the day, because VEP has been around for a long time, since before VST3, version 3. So the workaround is this extra virtual instrument called an event input. So now when I'm doing the drums, if I go to here to Void and I look at where Void is being routed to, I've sent it to TK11.2. Now, TK11.2 is using the event input version. It's not using this, it's using this. And if you notice up here, this is where I can send it to a different port. So now I'm saying send it to port 2, please. So that's been routed to port 2. Plugin is routing it to port 2 because Bitwig has no concept of port routing. So the plugin has to do it for us. And that's why we have to use the event input plugin. But what I've found in the process of doing that is that the traffic is not really that reliable, the note traffic. Like, sometimes it won't even play a note. Let's have a look at all these notes. If I start playing these notes, you don't actually hear anything sometimes until later. So we'll solo this, just solo that, because it's drums. Let's just solo the drum bass. Nothing, 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 nothing. Okay, so let's try that from here again. It worked that time. It's not reliable, and of course when I'm trying to do a demo, then it's always going to act like there's no problem. It's working now. I don't know. Maybe it's just when you start running out of RAM, then, you know, issues start affecting the traffic. Anyway, that was an issue for me. Apparently it's not an issue now, so go ahead, use it. But just be aware that you could have problems. I was trying to use this before, one of the pads up here, and I was getting stuck notes because it wasn't sending the note off events. But apparently it's working now, so good luck with that. So anyway, yeah, this obviously I'm in the middle of making this, so it sounds terrible. It's not exactly something that I would print out and upload just yet, but it allows me to show an example. Now we're just hearing the drum bass. But instead of me trying to do my mixing over here, like I was trying to before, what I really should, my intention is to actually do all of my mixing here. So where's that guitar that's really, oh, this is really low. There we go. I don't know why that was so low. So I've got two monitors, and I don't have to switch between apps in order to do this stuff, which kind of makes it a lot easier. It's just like having your DAW mixer on the other screen. So if you can cope with that, then you'll be right. And you can see I've got plugins, FX plugins running on here. I've got to undo. There we go. Let's have a look at some of the instruments. Here's one of the VSL native instruments. One of the free flute. And then this is from Sonic Couture. I think you can actually pop these open, so you can still have the mixer. And of course you can have these distributed across multiple monitors as well. So this is a bit of audio here, which is this little bit that you hear, this little flourish. It's really important to label everything, like Farlight's labeled here. And MIDI channel 8. So if you can see Farlight is properly labeled here as well. You can see MIDI channel 8, port 1. So because it's port 1, it's going, I've labeled this with the port number. So TK11.1, which means port 1. TK11.2 is port 2. So if I wanted port 3, I would grab another one of these event input plugins. TK11.3. I mean, I'm just making up this naming convention on the fly, but you can see the importance of being organized. So VE pre TK 11.3. So now I'm just going to say, give me port 3, and then assign it to TK11. Okay. So now if I wanted to, I could go into the server and I could create another instrument. Let's create another VST instrument. Let's do pigments. There's pigments. Now it's not in its own folder. It's just going to send to the master bus. In fact, I could just say, hey, you know what? Just send it to its own thing. Let's give it output 5 and 6, 7 and 8. And now I can say, hey, listening on port 3, MIDI channel 1. So now I could go back into the DAW Now I want to create a sequence for pigments, right? So now I've already got, so now I create an empty instrument, right? So in Bitwig, you can do Control T, or you can just go add instrument track, and then it's not going to ask you for one. So now this is an empty instrument track, and I just have a habit of saying no inputs. I could have an input, but I'm not going to. And now I go up here and I send it. See how it says notes to tracks? This area here. Under notes to tracks, I pick TK11.3 as my output track. And then that's all I have to do basically. And as long as my MIDI clips are channel 1, so if I create, let's just undo that. Let's just grab a pad, grab another pad. So let's grab one of these. And let's just stick it over here where the guitar starts playing. Now let's label this, right? So now I'm going to call this pigments. Okay. And I'm just going to check that this is channel 1. Yes, it is. It's channel 1. Okay. So that's going to port 3, because this is port 3 over here. And the MIDI clip itself is channel 1. And then back here with pigments, it's port 3, channel 1. And now it's going to come out in 7 and 8. So now I've got to go back to the original instance and make sure that 7 and 8 is free. Looks like 7 and 8 is used by the drum bus. So let's send it to 9 and 10. And I can just label this pigments as well. So naming is so important. So let's make that 9 and 10. Output 9 and 10. Bam-o, baby. All right. So now if I do this, just close up some of these other guys. Excellent. So our notes are coming out 9 and 10 where it says pigments, which is great. Excellent. So now this should work. If I go back here and hit play. Press pigments. There we go. There we go, that's a nice one. And that is how it is done. Now, let's say I wanted another synth. Easiest thing to do would just be to duplicate this guy. Duplicate. And then just change the MIDI channel to 2 for this. Let's load up Dream Synth. Just put this in a loop while I get this done. Go back here. Dream Synth. Now, Dream Synth is automatically been assigned to channel number 2, and we can just send that to 11 and 12. There it is, 11 and 12. Let's just push that back a bit. See the synth and the fader at the same time. Goodness me, that is a high gain output. What can we add on here? Give it a bit crushed PCM. I'll do that. Anyway. And there we have it, folks. I'll end the video there. So hopefully you get an idea of just exactly what this system does, how you might be able to use it, and how important it is to be organized if you're going to do it this way. Listen, it does seem like a lot of effort, but it's one of those trade-offs. Was once you decide to do really large projects in Bitwig, say for example orchestral projects, then I think it's going to be worth the effort, because if you're doing this commercially and you really have to work to a deadline and you've got the budget for it, you can have another 2 computers that are just sitting there running all of your plugins, and you can distribute the workload and then just use Bitwig as a sequencer. One of the reasons why I think I would prefer to work with Bitwig over other DAWs is, first of all, I'm used to it. I find it really creative, but you can actually still use all of these cool Bitwig tools. So you've got these MIDI effects for processing notes and stuff. Obviously the signal goes from left to right. So signal starts with the source material, which would be the MIDI clip. So what am I looking at here? The Fujara flute. So the MIDI clip would come into here. It would get manipulated into these strum arrangements, and then Humanize would manipulate it some more. And then it comes out the end and then heads down to the event client, which sends it to the server, which then sends it on to the player, which contains the Fujara flute. So you're taking advantage of all of this sort of stuff. The other thing to keep in mind is automation. Modulation 1 here is modulating far light, because that's what I set up here in this. Okay, so there's 2 things that I automated here. MIDI CC1, which was going to manipulate something in far light. Okay, so if we're going to have a look at far light, where is that? So see what happens to this when I'm traveling through this automation. Let's play. There we go. Anyway, there's still dropouts and all sorts of nonsense going over there. It's hardly a finished track. But you get the idea. So now, in order to, although the far light thing is down here, I'm not doing the automation from here. I probably could, because I could probably send this automation from here, and then I could tick this box over there which says use for automation. But I haven't read that far into it, so this is really just me going through a learning process and then sharing my progress with you guys. So I'm not by no means the expert. This is just sharing as I go, and then hopefully I'll get some comments back from you guys with some tips. Maybe you guys have done this with VEP and Bitwig, and you can show me a better way to do it. Because there's many ways to skin a cat when it comes to this sort of stuff. For example, instead of using multiple ports for one instance, I could just use multiple instances and then just have another one of these for every instance, and then not have to worry about this event input unreliability issues. I'm only really doing this is because I want to really explore the product. But there's the reason why I like having everything in one instance is so that I can just handle all the busing in a custom way. Let's go back to the mixer. You can see here with these folders are kind of implemented in a little bit of a clunky way. With both Bitwig and Studio One, if you group some tracks in Bitwig, it acts like a bus. So the group acts like both a folder and a bus at the same time, whereas folders and buses are handled separately in programs like Vienna Ensemble. So now I have to make a bus separately, which is under a folder. A folder's here just for organization purposes alone. But with Studio One, you still have to create both. You have to create a folder and you have to create a bus, but then you can assign a bus to a folder. So it's just a bit messy, but you know, it's not a deal breaker. But I like to use buses as equivalent to stems. So if I was going to print out the stems for this, I would do it based on these buses. So while we're talking about printing out stems, how would you print out stems for these virtual instruments coming back into this, what do they call this? Layers. Okay. These are just auxiliaries for that virtual instrument device. Okay. They're auxiliary channels in industry parlance. So how would I grab these and print them? The way to do that is to create an audio track. All right. Now for the audio track, the input, you go to the track where the multiple outputs are, and then you can go in there and I can say now, for example, drums, I can say pre or post. So in this case, I'm just going to do pre fader. And so this doesn't need to go to master now because I've already got other stuff going to master. I can just basically say that has no output. But I've got to make sure that I turn this on. If I don't turn this on, it won't work. So this is constant monitoring. I don't have to have record enabled here in order for this to be monitoring the output of that auxiliary channel. Okay, so this is monitoring it all the time. And now when I go to file, I can go export audio and I can select, was that audio channel 20? Right, and let's just say I want to just do wave export. Let's just do the loop. Where's the loop? Yeah, the loop's got some drums. All right. Now, if I, instead of highlighting the master project and I highlight this instead, I can print the contents of that. So that's how I do a print for this bus. Now click OK, and then I've got somewhere I can save it. Audio 20, just gonna hit print. Okay, so now if I go and grab that audio 20 file, back. Oh, it is the drums. It's the drum track. Exactly what we expected. So we've printed the drums because Audio 20 is pointed to the drum bus as labeled here, which just happens to be 7 and 8. Output 7 and 8. If we go back, we can check that and go and have a look at where the drums are. Oh, this drum bus here, output 7 and 8. I hope that's settled a few questions. I might make another video following up to this because I am just learning this. So hopefully I'll learn a bunch of new stuff, and hopefully I will do another cool project in the future using VEP, which I can share with you guys. One of the problems that I had, because I'm actually using an audio driver, which is a virtual audio device pointed at Reaper. So I'll just show you my Reaper, what it's doing at the moment. So Reaper is currently recording my vocal here as well as the DAW output. And you can see the DAW is coming in through this virtual audio interface. So you've got hardware inputs and then you've got virtual. But sometimes when you, like for example, if I shut down Reaper in the background, then VEP will lose its audio connection, and then all of these instruments in the whole project, all of the contacts and all of the libraries and everything has to reload, and it freaking takes ages. But now that I've got this lock over here, it means that, you know, let's just say I don't want to save any of the changes, which I don't. Let's just say I just close that. I don't save any changes. Now, if I wanted to load that project up again, it would take ages. But because all of the plugins haven't unloaded out of VEP, it means that this project actually loads really quick. In fact, it's done. That's it. The project's done. I can hit play. And it should play back. Yep. So nothing got unloaded. Isn't that incredible? So I can actually keep a massive template here in VEP, and the templates in my DAWs can actually be lightweight. So I can decide one day, actually I want to just use Reaper for this project, but still have my orchestral template loaded up here, and it's completely independent. And then I can just access my orchestral template from Studio One or Reaper or Harrison Mixbus or Traction Waveform, whatever it is that I decide to use on the day. I can have a whole lot of orchestral stuff just preloaded and ready to go. And if I want to, I can use these instances as like organizational tactics. And I can have more of my strings loaded in one instance and my brass loaded in another instance if I wanted to. So yeah, hopefully I'll get into some orchestral stuff later on down the track, and I'll use this more often, and I'll come back and I'll do a part 2. Anyway, thanks for sticking around, and I'll talk to you later.